It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. If you're not watching there already, go check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. And let us know if you have any questions in the comments. I'm sure we have a lot of comments about the Penguins right now. But also, check out the description of the show. We've got several links, including all of our great sponsors. But at the top, only for the next few weeks, is going to be year 7 of Rocking Around the 412. It's the GoFundMe link for our Christmas fundraiser we've done for the past 6 years. This is year 7, where we've raised money to be able to provide children in the local 724 and 412 area codes the Christmas that they have always deserved. Smitty and I never had to worry about where Christmas was coming from growing up, and so we wanted to be able to give back to the kids in our local area so they never have to worry about it as well. We have different ways that you can get involved. We've got the GoFundMe link, like I mentioned in the description, that is directly more towards like individual families, and we have a couple individual families that we are providing Christmas for so far this year. We're getting pretty late in the game, but I guess if we get enough money, we could probably include a third one. Maybe. We'll see. But also there is the Salvation Army in East Rochester, Pennsylvania, that we've partnered with the last couple of years, that we adopt kids off of their angel tree. So far, around 50 kids have been adopted this year. Over 50 kids are going to be provided Christmas this year, and it's our biggest year in terms of how many children are being provided Christmas, which is awesome to see. But there is still a few weeks left, so if you want to get involved in that, the GoFundMe is below, or you can reach out to either of us individually on social media, online, or Around the 412 social medias, and you can send money directly to us, or you can donate it to the GoFundMe, or you can get a tag at the East Rochester Salvation Army. The date for the presents to be back at the Salvation Army is December 9th, and our hard cutoff date for our GoFundMe is December 14th. Only a few weeks away, people, so get involved while you can before it's year 8 of Rocking Around the 412. Speaking of 8, I'm going to interrupt it. Speaking of 8 multi-goal blown leads by the Penguins so far this season. That's where I want to start off, of how disappointing this team continues to be.
All right. Well, first off, I wanted to, we're going to get into Penguins talk, but you went on a spiel there, and I wanted to add some context because I did on the Steelers show. So maybe there's some people that watch or listen to the Penguins one that don't watch or listen to the Steelers one. I just wanted to give you an update on this. I ran the numbers. When I say I ran the numbers, I literally in my head just had to, put these numbers together. 167 kids since the start of this Christmas mission in 2018 have had Christmas provided to them through the Rockin' Around the 412 fundraiser, which is absolutely awesome. That's a huge number for us. And it's all because of you guys. Every single penny that you guys donate goes directly to this cause. So very happy about that. Seeing that number kind of like blew my mind. I didn't realize it was that high. But this year's been massive, 50 plus this year, actually 60 total kids, because there's 54 tags and there's 6 kids within the 2 families. So 60 kids at least are going to have their Christmas provided to them from this Christmas mission, which is absolutely awesome. And to tie it back to the Penguins, one of the prizes, if you donate at least $10, is a set of Pittsburgh Penguin tickets, which, as Tyler said, now we can get into the Penguins talk. That's how I'll segue into the conversation.
Whether people are going to want that prize or not still.
Yeah, it's like, but that's considered like the grand prize for it is Pittsburgh Penguin tickets. But like, at this
point, I'd rather have one of our hoodies. I'd rather have a Game Changer shirt. I'd rather have a Pat Frymuth signed jersey.
I'd rather have a value of it.
Jersey.
Just the value of it. Like last week, me and 2 of our boys, Doug and John, we went for $30 to the game last Wednesday. Like, and it was, I don't know, like half capacity at PPG. Like, man, and that's actually the first game.
$30 is typically like student rush tickets. Like that's typically what I did back in the day to get us to games.
I miss those days. Yeah. When you weren't a student, but still had the ID to be able to go to student rush. Yeah. Those were the days. But anyway, so last Wednesday was the first game that took place after our recording last week. Overtime loss 3-2 to the Red Wings. They fall down behind 2 goals to nothing early in that one, climb their way back, lose in overtime. The loss to the Blue Jackets on Friday I mean, very easily the worst performance out of these. Not that any of them were like spectacular by any means like that, but Columbus, not a good team, obviously. And to be outclassed in that fashion against that team in that manner, I believe, was that Tristan Jarry's first game back in net? I think he gave up 2 goals on the first 3 shots.
He gave up 2 goals on the first 3 shots, gave up 5 on the night.
Yeah, awesome. And then back-to-back nights, so they play Saturday as well. Did a win against the Sharks, but that was even frustrating because they have a 3-1 lead with 10 minutes to go against the Sharks. Let the Sharks get a point out of it, and then not only does it not do they not take care of business in the overtime period, it goes all the way to shootout in like 5-6 rounds of a shootout it took to put away the lowly San Jose Sharks. And then at the time of recording this last night, so Tuesday, playing the Tampa Bay Lightning, they have a 2-goal lead going into the third period, playing very well across the board. I mean, even Tristan Jarry up to that point was playing well. And then just a complete collapse, as we've become accustomed to seeing. You mentioned this is the 8th time that they've had. Was it 8 third goal? Or I'm sorry, third period leads blown, or 8 2-goal lead?
8. I don't know if it's 8 multi-goal leads that they've blown.
So not necessarily in the third period,
first 21 games. But if you want to talk about in the third period, Bob Grove, which if you don't follow Bob Grove on Twitter,
he's fantastic for this type of information.
He's great. In their last 5 games, the Penguins in the third period have been outshot 67-36. And in their last 3 games, it's 42-18 in the third period. As well as since the Capitals game where they had that nice win down in Washington, the Penguins have been outscored in the third period 8-0. And also, I looked this up on my own because I was curious. On the season, they've given up most of their goals in the third period, and they've given up 28 goals in the third period. They've given up 30 or 84 on the season, which is worst in the NHL, by the way. 32nd in the league. Awesome. And they are 25th in scoring.
What do you think? Like, there's a lot of things that I think go into this, but if you could boil it down to the simplest thing, what do you think is the primary reason that this is the case? Like how bad they are when they have the lead, or how bad they are in the third period, however you want to look at it.
I think it's mentality. I genuinely think that it is their mentality that not necessarily it's the mentality of teams we've seen in the past. Like you saw it when the Penguins played the Ottawa Senators in 2017. You've seen it against the Islanders. People saw it against the Kings, where they get a goal and then they will just grind you out the rest of the game to try to keep that short lead. Like it would be a 1-0 lead, a 2-1 lead, 2-0 lead. That type of team is not what you're seeing. I think the mentality of this team is they get a multi-goal lead and then all of a sudden they feel the pressure to keep that lead. And it's almost like they play scared as if they're going to give up a goal. And whenever you're not driving offense, and that's another thing. Even if this team wanted to try to do and emulate what those other teams were able to do, they're not good enough defensively to do that. And they don't have the goaltending more often than not to be able to do that. So when you're not still trying to drive offense in the third period, the other team is going to attack you. The other team is going to be coming at you, spending a lot of time. I'm curious to see what like the time on ice in the third period would be, because I feel like the vast majority of it has to be in the Penguins' defensive zone more often than not, especially recently. It's considering how many shots they've given up in the third period. But I just think it's a mentality. I think it is something that is going back to, I mean, you could put it on the players, but it's for sure going back to coaching as well. And they are playing scared to give up leads, which ultimately is the reason why they are giving them up. They're not playing the way they are in the first couple periods. I mean, look at that Tampa Bay game. The Tampa Bay game, they had a 2-0 lead entering the third period, and that arguably one of the best first 2 periods of a game they've had the entire season from top to bottom, including Tristan Jarry, quite frankly. And in the third period, they kind of turtle themselves. They get into their shell, and all of a sudden, Tampa Bay is just flipping the ice, and they're hemming the Penguins in their the defensive zone, and you suddenly blow the lead because you are not continuing to do what you did in the first two periods. You're not continuing to try to drive offense. You're just afraid to give up goals, and ultimately, that's the reason you're going to give them up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree about the coaching. I think that's why you've seen pieces be changed in and out, right? Like, but this aspect of the team has remained regardless of who's part of the roster. They've struggled with this over the last few seasons. Like, it's kind of corresponded with the downfall of this team is this one thing, them blowing multi-goal leads, I feel like has kind of coincided with the downfall of the franchise over the last few seasons. So yeah, I agree, because I don't think that the personnel has made a difference. So obviously you have guys that have been, like Crosby's been part of this, Gina's been part of this, Chris Letang, obviously Erik Karlsson last year. But like going back to the first year that they missed the playoffs, how many guys are even still Brian Rust? How many guys are Marcus Pettersson? I'm trying to figure out literally on the fly. How many guys
I'm pretty sure you probably have no more than 7 or 8 guys from that 2022 team right now. I mean, you've got the big three. You got Marcus Pettersson. You have Jarry, who was still here. But Brian then Rust. Outside of that, you have Brian Rust, and then you traded for Ricardo Kell. So you have like 7 to 8 guys that were still on the team that are on the team now. But
that's crazy.
That the turnover from that year to this year, and not only has it continued to happen, it's gotten worse. The team has continued to get worse. At least in 2022, at times they were more competitive than what they've shown right now. At least they were on the brink of a playoff team in that year. I don't even think that they are anywhere close to that right now. And I think that them blowing these leads and having that mentality and the coaching has gotten worse the last 3 seasons. And I think that it's coming to a head right now. And that's why the Penguins are in the situation that they're at. That's why they are blowing these games. And I think that ultimately, if you're going to want a big change, that starts with a head coach. But like I've said, maybe if you bring in a head coach, you start losing or not blowing some of these leads. Maybe that the mentality changes and something in the third period at least changes. But overall, I think at least for this season, changing a head coach doesn't do much, because once you tear down the actual coaching and mentality of this team, like I mentioned and what we mentioned in 2022, at least they were partially competitive, even with the roster ineptitudes that they had and the blown leads they had in 2022. But every single year it's gotten worse from personnel standpoint. This year, coincidentally enough, we thought it got better. And the eye test and the statistics are not backing that up at all. And in fact, they're saying that they got worse. And whenever you're worse on the ice, I just don't think that any head coach is going to come in and change this team. You might change a mentality, and you might get a little more, as a Mike Sullivanism, a compete level out of this team. But ultimately, that's not going to change them playing better defense. That's not going to change them getting the better goaltending. There's just a ton of problems right now for the Penguins. And they've gotten a few points in these games, but with the games in hand that so many of these teams have had on the Penguins and still continue to have on the Penguins, most of the teams in the Metropolitan and for quite frankly in the Eastern Conference have at least 3 games on the Penguins played in hand. And so even though the Penguins right now are 1 point out of a wild card spot, they're 3. The next team, who has it? I was just looking at it. The Islanders are 1 point out of a wild card spot. They've got 2 games in hand on the Penguins. The Bruins have a game in hand on the Penguins. The Rangers have 4 games in hand on the Penguins. Yeah. So many of these teams, like you look at the actual point total, and it's not actually adding up for realistically where the Penguins are currently sitting.
I want to tie in the coaching thing just because I think that you're right that you would probably, if you move on from Sullivan, you bring in somebody else, you're probably getting a short-term bump, I think. I don't think it's going to be something like we saw when they went from Mike Johnston to Mike Sullivan, where you saw that quick of a turnaround. I don't think that they have the roster that's capable of doing something like that. They don't have many guys like this on the ice, but in your mind, and I don't know how far you've dug into it, because we've been thinking about moving on from Sullivan for a while, even if the organization hasn't. In your mind, is there a coach out there that is potentially a game changer? What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I am wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. Which, by the way, the reason that I'm bringing this up, the Boston Bruins fired their coach, Jim Montgomery, who are they've underachieved this year, no doubt. 8, 9, and 3 so far out of the gate here in their first 20. They are tied right now for that second wild card. They have the same amount of points as the Islanders. They have one more game played. So they're willing to make a move like that. I think they probably internally, like even though the Penguins won't admit it, Boston probably views themselves as a team that should be more in the mix than where they're at right now. And I get that.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether it's Jim Montgomery, because I've seen some Penguins fans even throw that out there that they'd move on right now from Mike Sullivan to bring him in, or somebody else. We've talked about the idea of moving on from Mike Sullivan. Have you let your mind go to a place of a potential replacement yet, or you're just resigned to the fact that it would probably be David Quinn for the time being?
The latter. I have thought about who it could be if they went with an outside hire, and ultimately I always come back to it's just going to be David Quinn. And I think that was a succession plan that was kind of planned a little bit by Kyle Dubas and the Penguins, but I don't know that they necessarily thought they would be considering moving on from Mike Sullivan. And then ultimately, we don't even know. We don't know if they actually are. We have no idea what the relationship.
No, but I think
is
like you kind of said there,
I think it is. It is a contingency plan for Mike Sullivan. If they ultimately had to make that decision, David Quinn has head coaching experience, albeit not great head coaching experience, and the teams that he has coached, but he has the head coaching experience. It's easy for them to just transition to him, even if it's in an interim role, to have him as the interim head coach. But I mean, there are guys out there that are always going to be brought up whenever head coaches in the NHL get brought up, that not necessarily guys I would jump at, but they're always going to be surrounded by head coaching hires. Like you think of like a Gerard Gallant, a Jay Woodcroft, which, I mean, out of those two, I would be more interested in Woodcroft. That's kind of where I'm at, which a couple seasons ago, I remember people talking about Jay Woodcroft potentially coming to the Penguins. Didn't really love the idea, but now the current state of the team, I feel like a change of pace would be pretty good for the team.
Here's what I'll say though. Like, it's funny because we were just talking about like the short-term bump thing and stuff like that. If I felt like this team was just underachieving, like the roster was good enough, but like Sullivan just wasn't getting it done and they were underachieving, my mind would change and I'd say Gallant, because I think for whatever reason, immediate results, like it fades quickly, but immediate results in that second year.
Gerard Gallant as a head coach is what Jim Rutherford was as a GM for the Penguins.
Yeah.
They just couldn't get over the hump. GM JR comes in, gets them over the hump. They win 2 cups. That is something that I agree with
maybe
you on.
Maybe he'd be the right guy in like Boston. I don't know, because
potentially. Yeah. I mean, I think there's guys out there that could be outside hires. Ultimately, though, I don't think that would be in the season. I feel like if it happened during the season, it would be David Quinn as at least an interim head coach, if not just given the job outright. So the thing is, too, we've talked about this a lot. We've talked about firing Mike Sullivan and our opinions on it. But ultimately, it doesn't seem like the Penguins or Kyle Dubas are eager to make that move. And
no,
I don't know that it's going what it's going to take for them to get to a place where they decide to ultimately bite that bullet. But it doesn't seem to me like Kyle Dubas has a fire under him to fight or fire Mike Sullivan. It seems to me like he's pretty complacent, and that makes me wonder if Sullivan is, without a lack of a better term, like kind of in on it, where without saying it, because the Penguins would never say it. You just mentioned that too. Is Sullivan potentially in on it that this year is kind of just lost, and we're going to come back in 2025 when we have more cap space and potentially try to do something there and hope a guy like Tristan Jarry finds his footing again at the NHL level? Because ultimately, if something that there's a lot that this is hanging on, but if that happens, it's easier pill to swallow that this team could turn around if Tristan Jarry finds his footing. But if he doesn't, you might as well just commit to the rebuild and just full on tank at that point. But they're never going to say that. So is there a chance that behind closed doors, Dubas and Sullivan have had that conversation?
Sure. Yeah, there's certainly a chance. It kind of takes away the question I was going to ask you, so we'll get through this and then I'll ask you it. But if the rest of the year goes the way that I expect it to, I just don't know how you go into 2025 with Tristan Jarry on the roster. Like, I'm hopeful that there's a plan in place. We talked a lot about plans that they put in place, such as David Quinn being on the staff to at least take over an interim base if he had to. I'm hopeful that there's a plan in place to move on from Tristan Jarry after the season. Even yesterday, right? We just talked about how he played pretty well for a couple periods. Somehow, just because of the third period and then the goal that he lets up in overtime where he's, I don't know, a football field away from the net for whatever reason, he finished yesterday with negative goals save above expected somehow, despite how he played in the first, not giving up a goal in the first two periods. Like, he just, you want to talk about like a mentality thing, just soft. Like, he is not mentally built for this, and it sucks. Like, I'm sorry to say that, but that's just the way that it is. I don't question the physical talent. I think that we've seen him be able to put on display how good he can be. I just have zero faith in the guy because I don't trust him, and I don't think he trusts himself. I don't think the organization trusts him. I think that they're attached.
Has he turned into the player that he replaced? Has he turned into Matt Murray in that sense, where you just can't trust him to go out on the ice and get you a win?
Yeah, I guess so. You know, I don't recall, and maybe it's because like the team wasn't like bad yet, but I really don't recall it being this bad with Matt Murray. And maybe I'm like really like pushing it to the back of my mind, but like a 5-something goals against average, like Tristan Jarry's currently rocking.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like having to send him down for a conditioning stint. I don't like.
Yeah, no, it was never this bad with Murray, at least from a statistic standpoint. His highest goals against average was actually in 2017-18 at 2.92. His last year in Pittsburgh in 38 games played had 2.87, but his save percentage was an 899. So that's where you started to see the dip.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's whenever Tristan Jarry was an all-star, and then 2 years later, Tristan Jarry was an all-star again. Like, and that's probably the most frustrating part, is because we saw the pedigree, we saw it play out on the ice that this is an all-star talent in net, but ultimately that has diminished over the past couple of seasons, even worse than what it was when he was an all-star. Because even when he was an all-star, we had our issues with Tristan Jarry. I mean, think about, I'm pretty sure the same year he was an all-star was that Islanders series.
Yeah, it was.
And I just think about how different this team could have been if some of those moments didn't happen, but he's diminished and his confidence has diminished. And ultimately, like they have a game on Friday. They have to go to Alex Nedeljkovic, I feel like. That overtime goal alone was bad enough to where I think it was an inexcusable.
I mean, the thing is too, like, they can split it up however they want. They play back to back, so like, you're gonna see.
That's fair.
But it's the Jets and Utah, so I agree with you. I think it will be Nedeljkovic against the Jets Friday, and then Jarry will see Utah on Saturday. But
I don't know how they get Jarry off the roster. By the way, I know you mentioned in the off season you want to get them off the roster. I don't know how they get them off the roster. Your only option in that case might be buyout, and that just seems like something Dubas isn't going to want to do. But at the same time, if you have no other shooters, what other choice are you going to have? And just to give you some numbers on that buyout, he would be on the books until after the 2030-2031 season. So it would be 6 seasons after this one. His cap hits by year would be 1.7 and change, 5 million and change, 4.5 and change, and then 797,000 the last 3 seasons.
I'm gonna make a prediction right now, and this is just purely going off vibes. Don't know why I feel this way. I think they're gonna be able to trade him. I don't think they're gonna have to buy him out. I don't think they're going to get anything back.
Do you
but I
think it's
they're gonna be
because? Well, I know this is different because you got something back, but ultimately the trade has been questionable to a certain extent. Do you think if you could trade Mikael Granlund, you could trade anybody? Is that kind of like the mentality?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, it just takes one team. Like, if there's one team that's like looks at him and it's like, okay, he's a 2-time All-Star. We've seen what he can do. Maybe he just needs a change of scenery, and maybe there's a player on their roster that's the exact same thing, and that's what ends up coming back to the Penguins. I don't know. I also I know that Dubas wouldn't want to do this, but how much have we talked about their ability to acquire assets? Like, what if he uses one of those picks, those extra picks that we've acquired now, attaches it to Jarry to get the money off the books? So it kind of sucks to have to give up one of those additional picks that we've gotten, but
might be worth
cap
it.
space. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just that's purely how I feel right now. That could change. And maybe he finds his footing and it makes it easier to move him. Like, even if he finds his footing the rest of this year, by the way, I don't know if the team's mind would change. My mind, or I'm like, I don't know if the team's mind would change. Mine certainly wouldn't. I would still want to move him, regardless of what he does the rest of 2024 into 2025. What I wanted to ask you is, regardless of what we feel in terms of the leash for Mike Sullivan, say he is kind of in the background, really part of the front office as well, and kind of making all these moves, and the understanding this entire time has been we need a roster reset, if you will, to hopefully compete on the back end of this thing with Sid and Gino and whoever. Say that is the case, so be it. Then this is a moot point. But for us having this discussion right now, what do you think the leash is? Like, do you really feel like that is the case? Or do you feel like there is a point that it could get to where the team would move on?
I think there is a point where they move on. I don't think that they have had a closed door conversation about, hey, Mike, we're just kind of selling it in this season, and we're going to hope for next year, because I don't know that there is a next year for Mike Sullivan. And it's kind of an awkward space where I don't think that he's coaching for his job, but at the same time, I think he can be fired. And I know that that's kind of contradictory, but I think that the reason I say that is because I feel like it is going to take something along the lines of a 10-plus game losing streak for this team to finally move on from
Play
Mike
the Jets
Sullivan.
Friday.
I do not see them making it a easy decision for the team. I just don't think that you're going to get to a place where, oh, we've lost a few games in a row, we're not in a good place in the standings, we're going to move on from Mike Sullivan. I just think I would have to get worse than what people are going to think in order to move on from Sullivan, because, and I'm curious of this, and I'd have to actually go look at this, and maybe I'll look at it so I can bring it up on next week's show. Where is this team at in accordance to where the 2015 team was at before they moved on from Mike Sullivan and Mike Johnston, and brought in Mike Sullivan? Like, where is that team lining up as far as point totals, standings, results in the games, as far as like goals against, goals for, and how is it stacking up? Because if it's remotely close, Sullivan should have been gone already. If it's even worse, I think it's inexcusable.
They were, when they fired Mike Sullivan, when they brought in Mike Sullivan, fired Mike Johnston. It happened after a shootout loss to the Los Angeles Kings that dropped them to 15-10-3 on the season. They were currently in 5th place in the Metro.
Yeah, I mean, right now
his overall record at the time was 58-37-15.
Yeah, there's something that's got to give with this team and their coach. Like, and if it gets to a point where we are in February and Mike Sullivan is still around, then I don't think he's being fired this year. But I think if it's going to happen, it's going to happen before the new year. And if it doesn't happen before the new year, I don't think it's happening at all this season.
Like, barring a miraculous turnaround, I think we're both on the same page. I know how we felt preseason, but I think we're on the same page now with saying this team's not going to make the playoffs, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
so
if they made the playoffs, that might be the biggest comeback in Penguins history as far as a team making the playoffs.
So that would make 3 consecutive seasons of this team missing the postseason. I mean, I like Mike Sullivan, think he's a good coach. no playoff series win since 2018 when they got bounced in the second round by the Capitals. And I understand one of those was like a COVID bubble thing. It was a short series. I understand that your goaltender's been hurt or bad for some of those series as well. At some point, that's going to fall on the guy behind the bench. And I think it's now. I think the time is now to make that change before we get into, hopefully the latter years here where we are competing on the back end of Sid and stuff. Like, I think that it's time for a fresh voice. I don't think it's going to make a ton of change or a ton of difference in 2024, but I'm hopeful that kickstarts what it could look like for 25 and 26.
Yeah, I think if you get to the point where you miss the postseason again, which ultimately we both think they're going to do, and most people probably think they're going to do, it almost seems inevitable at this point, which is sad to say. A little over halfway through November. But I just think that, and I say that because I feel like if you get to the new year and he's not fired yet, it's almost like what's the point of firing him midseason now? Like, there's nothing to play for. You're not playing for anything. I don't think that they would make the postseason still, which, I mean, I guess there are contradictory statements to that too, because I remember on January 11th, I believe the date was, the Penguins were in they were out of a playoff spot in 2016, and then they made the cup. But this team is also not organized to be able to do that. They don't have that young talent that's ready to come up to the NHL level to give that boost with the new head coach. And that's why I think that if it happens before the new year, great. I still don't think it's going to change much, but that's when I think it's going to happen. If it happens after the new year, I don't think it's going to happen. And I think it could happen after the season at that point, because once the season ends and you can say, hey, we haven't made the postseason in 3 years running, and we're looking at you on that. And maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. I just think that there's going to be there's a line where during the season where if it happens before or after this date, which I'm just making that New Year's because that's an easy line to draw, but there's a line where it's like, if it hasn't happened yet, what's the point? Just wait till after the season to do it.
Well, my response to that would be, I understand there's not like a ton in the pipeline, but I feel like, whether it's Puustinen, Puljujarvi, Drew O'Connor, like some of the younger players that are going, or, Pomeranov, some of the guys you got in the Hurricanes deal, whoever, I would want to at least start to see them get a look within a different system. I feel like as soon as possible. So I like, that's to me the same reason for like Daniel Jones being benched, right? I know that there's a financial aspect. I'm bringing football into it right now, but also because you hope to get a look about the other pieces within it. Like, it's not necessarily just about Daniel himself. You want to see how the other pieces are operating. So in this case, bringing it back to the Penguins now, I would want to start to see what these guys look like in a new system, to make some calls about, do we think that they're going to be part of the future?
And
but
the response I have to that too is, I don't think that new system would come until the following season.
That's what the Butler's going to be.
If
you're not making the permanent coach at the time, then I'm not sure how much that matters. But I mean, I guess you get a look at the versatility. How many different systems can the guys play in? I don't know. Either way, like, I don't know. I get both arguments. I would rather move on sooner rather than later, pretty much in any case.
For sure. I agree. I would have probably considered moving on already.
I think that they've had a lot of losses this year that were like, yeah, that would be the one for me. I mean, the loss to the Blue Jackets on Friday, I feel like it's the most recent example. 6-2 to the Blue Jackets. Before that, 7-1 to the Stars, where they get skated off the ice. It seems like there's one a week.
Opening night, 6-0. 6-0 to the Rangers.
There's one a week, seemingly. Every time they play the Oilers. Like, there's a lot of performances where you just sit there and look and you're like, yeah, that's the type of performance that in another city, in another situation, probably gets that coach fired.
Well, and I wonder how long the Penguins can sit at the bottom of the Metropolitan Division before they make that switch. Because while they're not at the bottom right now, I mentioned those games in hand. The Blue Jackets currently have 3 games in hand on the Penguins. They're only 2 points behind the Penguins. If they win one and then lose one in overtime at the worst of those 3 games, they're ahead of the Penguins right now.
Yeah.
This is the worst this team has been, not in our lifetime, technically, but since we have consciously been watching hockey and are aware of what's going on the ice. The Sidney Crosby era, this is the worst this team has been, and I think there's got to be a breaking point at some point.
We've made a lot about the 4-game point streak that they've had. Look at the teams that they've played within that, right? I mean, it's the Red Wings, it's the Jackets, who they didn't get a point against. Who was the third team? The Sharks. The shootout.
Yeah, the Sharks are the third worst team in hockey right now.
And then they blow a 2-goal lead against the Lightning, so they get a point there. But 4 points in 4 games, I think in certain circumstances, like, we would take that. But you look at the stretch of teams that they played and also where they're at right now, and that's just not gonna. You know what's not gonna do? It's not gonna cut it. Smitty from around the 412 here, and while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app The Cut, book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. That actually wasn't even planned for me to work that in there that way, but hey, I guess it worked out. Do you have anything else to add about the Penguins? Because
just adding on a little bit to what you were just talking about, the Penguins against teams that are above 500 are 1-9-3. The Penguins against teams that are below 500 are 6-1-1. Is
it Capitals?
It's got to be the Capitals. I haven't checked, but it's got to be the Capitals. That's the only team that's above 500 that I remember them beating. The Capitals are having a good season. The Capitals have handled their retooling with their older players better than the Penguins have.
Yeah,
and it's showing and it's paying dividends towards them, because they're actually in a contending spot in the Metro and in the East. Look at where the Penguins are at. But yeah, 1-9-3.
I really like that their head coaching hire, by the way. Spencer Carberry.
1-9-3 against teams that are above 500, and in their next 20 games, 13 of the teams are above 500.
Nice. See where things are at. See how far we can bottom out. All right. Well, other than that, if you guys notice, there is a newish sponsor. I believe this is the second week that Marcello Electric has been above Tyler. Our friend Brandon Marcello, aka Boots, started his own electrical company. Was in, doing his own thing for a long time. Him and his brother both quit their jobs, left the companies that they worked for to start their own company. So that's a big leap. Shout out to Boots. Lawrence County, Butler County, Allegheny County, Beaver County. If you are in one of those areas, you need some electrical work done, commercial or residential, hit them up. Facebook link down below. Directly message them through there, or phone number is attached for the business as well. So Marcello Electric, hit them up for your electrical needs. Probably make a video at some point in the future, but I keep saying I'm going to redo the old ones, and I haven't done that either. So who knows? But other than that, also check out the description, because not only is Marcello Electric there, all of our great sponsors there. Game Changers down there. Save yourself $10 using code AT412. I'm sure right now you do not want a Pittsburgh Penguins shirt. However, they got Steelers shirts, a bunch of different college football ones. Did you ever get that BYU one, by the way?
Yeah, I got the Steve Young one.
Okay, and they've come out like they kind of like revamped the style of shirts that they put out. Man, they have an Ashton Genty one that I really want. I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but they're like, like the big face ones, or just the different looking ones, which are pretty dope. So save yourself $10 using code AT412 at checkout over there. Get some shorts, DC4L Customs. That link is down below. Everything Custom Designs, our friend Haley Wagner's small business. T-shirts, hoodies, long sleeves, tumblers, bunch of different stuff for the holiday season, or get some of our merch. Again, 2 of those hoodies are going to be part of Rocking Around the 412. Year 7 going on right now. Donate at least $10. You'll be eligible to win a prize. Every single penny that is donated, though, goes directly to helping kids in the 724 and 412 area codes have the Christmas that they deserve. Again, right now, 167 kids over the 7 years have had their Christmas provided to them through this mission. 60 of those have happened just this year. big shout out to Kaylee and Isla for making that happen. I mean, 40 some, I believe, through Isla's school/preschool. So
Yeah, that's wild.
massive stuff going on over there, and we're very excited about that. Partnering up with the East Rochester Salvation Army, as we have. This is year 3 of doing so. If you want to donate specifically for that cause, December 9th, hard cutoff date to have everything over there. So I would need the stuff beforehand if you want to take a tag. December 14th, hard cutoff date for everything else. For the families that we find, we have 2 right now. Certainly, if you guys donate enough money, we can definitely find a 3rd family, I'm sure. So I will press hard if I have to, if we get enough donations in. So be sure to do that. Link down below for that as well. Anything else, Tyler?
No. Ultimately, no. Let's go Pens, but probably not.
Longer Pens show than Steelers show this week. Not sure I had that on my bingo card, but
well, ultimately, when there's good things to talk about, sometimes it goes quicker. Because
that's the way it works.
I feel like a lot of the times we become more long-winded when we have some bad things to talk about, no matter what team it is.
Yeah, you had like a 7-minute monologue.
Our shows are longer when the teams are doing worse.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully the comments can talk through it with us. So let us know your thoughts on the state of the team right now, any questions that you have for a future episode, all that good stuff and more. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you are here on YouTube. Even if you're listening somewhere else, head over to the YouTube to do so. And if you're watching here on YouTube, go leave us a 5-star review and subscribe on a listening platform of choice, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from. Let's cross-pollinate, folks. Let's help us out in every way that we can. And then find us everywhere at Around the 412 and let us know, should Around the 412 make a Blue Sky? I have a personal account. Should we make one for the podcast? Let me know that in the comments as well. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Penguin Show. We'll talk to you next time.